Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining the Spiritist Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I am very happy to be here to host this talk by LUIZ Lima, who will be leading our live with the theme, The Spiritual Layers of the Planet. I would like to take a brief moment for two announcements. The first is there is a new podcast series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna J. Angelis. And please note, there is a new episode every Friday. The Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna J. Angelis and will offer a safe space to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, bringing insights, actionable tips, and real-world advice to help you lead a better life. Please subscribe to receive notifications of the new episodes at the USSF YouTube channel. And please note, on the screen, there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, please scan the QR code on screen for your donation. Now, back to LUIZ Lima. Together with everyone who is watching this live broadcast now, I want to give you a very warm welcome. It is wonderful to have you with us today to discuss the spiritual layers of the planet. And I am sure you are as eager as I am to hear from LUIZ. But before he starts to enlighten us in the next hour, please allow me to formally introduce him. LUIZ Lima began his journey in Spiritism in 1990 and continues today as a serious researcher on the scientific aspect of Spiritism. LUIZ has been facilitating the studies of how to bridge science and Spiritism in both languages, Portuguese and English. Mr. Lima is a renowned lecturer in the Spiritist movement and participates in local and national seminars and events throughout the year. LUIZ Lima holds a degree in electronic engineering and works in the computer network industry. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. LUIZ has reserved time to address your comments and questions once he concludes his presentation. So please welcome LUIZ Lima.
Bradley, thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure studying, and we're all learning anyway, so there is no one better than the other here. This particular topic, the spiritual layers of the planet, this is something that for me personally, it fascinates me. I started studying this thing, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago, because I wanted to have a better understanding of what happens when we die. And that's the goal of this lecture, to explain the spiritual layers of the planet and what happens when we discarnate. Where do we go? So we're going to bring some graphics here because I think it's just easier to understand using the graphics here. Anytime we speak about something spiritual, something spirit related, it automatically connects us to the study of fluids, because that's what the spiritual world is. It's fluidic, and it's not different here. So we're going to have to go back to the very beginning to contextualize fluids and then the spiritual fluidic layers of the planet. So let's go join me on this right here, if you will. From the very beginning, the Supreme Intelligence, also known as first cause of all things, God. From God, we know that two things emanate. And this is explained very clearly in the Spirit's book and additional Spiritist literature. This particular slide here that I'm going to show you, it's more to contextualize. We're not going to go very deep in it because it would be more part of a study like maybe evolution or so. Anyway, let's go there. So from God two things emanate. First, spiritual principle. Let me just spend a minute on the word principle. Principle, it's used a lot in mathematics and physics. Principle, it's something that potentially can happen. It's a potential. It's not something that is already in place per se. Principle means something that is ready to happen, ready to come around. It's ready for those things. So spiritual principle contains the seeds of anything that one day is going to be spiritual. Okay? The second thing that emanates from God is the universal cosmic fluid. And again, inside the universal cosmic fluid are the seeds of everything that one day is going to become matter as we know it. This is called the material principle. So when you look at the screen here, there are basically, in simple words, two things that emanate from God: spiritual principle and material principle. The entire creation happens when the spiritual principle interacts with the material principle / universal cosmic fluid. How does it happen? It's just for analogy, just think of you get a little Lego blocks and you give to a baby. You give to a very young child, a baby. So you give him 10 of those blocks. On the first days, he's not going to be able to do anything. And young children, they're going to throw it out. They're going to put on their mouths. They're not going to be able to even grasp the idea of putting the 2 blocks together, let alone 3, 4, 5. It will happen by experience, by trial and error. At one point, that little young child is going to say, oh, I got this block, I got this. If I put them together, oh, they stick together. And it goes from there. It's a lot of trial and error. It is the same thing here. The spiritual principle will make, I wouldn't use this word, incursions into the material principle more and more and more, each time more, to create things. Again, the entire creation comes from this interaction. Now, notice one thing. The spiritual principle and the material principle have nothing in common. That's why in the graphic, you see 2 separate squares or blocks. There is no common points. There is nothing in the spiritual principle that is matter. There is nothing in the material principle that is spiritual. They are completely separate, 100%. Now, the interaction between those will, that's how creation happens. And this trial and error from the spiritual principle, like I said, it goes further and further and further, just like the kids using more blocks, 3 blocks, then 4 blocks, and 5 blocks. It's more or less the same thing. Until this spiritual principle gets so, I'm going to use the word advanced because it starts from nothing, called simple and ignorant. It will get to a point where it knows now how to handle matter and all its subparticles from the quarks and electrons and whatever it is, bosons, hadrons, all of those things. By then, the spiritual principle is already knowledgeable on how to use these things. And you will learn now how to infuse life into matter, static matter, inert matter. That is when the spiritual principle learns how to use something that is part of the material principle. It's kind of hidden in there. It's called vital principle. When the spiritual principle learns how to utilize the vital principle, it now is able to infuse life, create life. And then it gets a different name. It's like a graduation or a diploma, if you will. We call it intelligent principle. So every time we say intelligent principle, it has to do with life. We do not use intelligent principle for the mineral kingdom, for example. For the mineral kingdom, a better expression would be spiritual principle. So we have things clear. We don't use the same name for two different things or vice versa. So this intelligent principle, which is an evolution of the spiritual principle, will continue to go into the material principle to create more things. But the things that it creates are much more advanced than before. So you will go through the entire plant kingdom from the most simplest form of plant to the most complex. Then it continues going through the animal kingdom, going from the simplest single cell, unicellular animal, all the way to the more complex ones. You will develop. So the intelligent principle develops by, again, joining with the material principle. It just now is able to create things that are much more complex than the spiritual principle can. And there's going to be a point where this intelligent principle becomes so intelligent that it kind of graduates again. It gets a second diploma, if you will, using a more modern word. And it becomes a spirit. A spirit means an intelligent principle that became so advanced that is able to sustain itself by itself. It has its own consciousness. The spirit does not stop. The interaction with the material principle continues. So the spirit will continue acting upon the universal cosmic fluid, the material principle, to form other things. But of course, the things that the spirit are able to, or is able to form, are much, much, much more complex than before, than things that were created in the plants kingdom, animal kingdom, let alone mineral kingdom. And this spirit, by interacting with the universal cosmic fluid, is going to generate two types of what we call matter, because it comes from the material principle. That's why we take the name matter, but in two forms. One form is called imponderable matter, and the other form is called ponderable matter. We're going to detail this shortly, but in simple words, ponderable matter is anything that we are able to perceive using our five senses. So they have to be incarnated, and you have five senses to perceive the ponderable matter. That's a physical, material world. Now, also the imponderable matter that the spirit is able to generate, it's something that we do not perceive. We are not able to perceive using our five senses. We need other types of sensors, which are called vital forces, vital centers, chakras, different names, but that's the idea. So we use those things to perceive the imponderable matter, and we use our five senses to perceive our the physical world, ponderable matter. Okay, so this is how we're going to contextualize fluids. So fluids start all the way up from the universal cosmic fluid, and they will be modified little by little. It's not a snap of fingers that, for example, one thing that we, not necessarily we mean it, but we say it. Well, we are able to go to the universal cosmic fluid and do this and that. Well, hold on. Let's take a better look at this statement, because it might be misleading. So we cleaned up the graphic a little bit here. So we are talking about ponderable and imponderable matter formed by modifying the universal cosmic fluid. So we're going to start from the very top. I'm representing the universal cosmic fluid here with this purple balloon. The universal cosmic fluid is where the entire creation is immersed in. So when you look at this, there's a physical limitation, which is the drawing itself. But that's only a visual tool. There is no limitation. The universal cosmic fluid populates the entire universe. Now, from this universal cosmic fluid, which is the pure form of fluid, you will be modified in stages. Okay, so the first stage is a group of spirits, which are the most advanced spirits in the universe, will be able to touch it. They don't create it, but they will be able to touch it and modify it to something that we call the cosmic dwellings. So cosmic dwellings is something that is already modified. It's no longer the universal cosmic fluid in its original form. No, it's modified. So once these cosmic dwellings are in place per se, another group of spirits will take this and do a second layer of modifications. And it's going to create what we call, typically we call stellar organizations. Again, stellar organizations, they come from the universal cosmic fluid, but it's not a direct modification. There's a layer in between. Once this is in place, stellar organizations are out there. Another group of spirits is going to modify these to create the galaxies. And it continues. Once the galaxies, several different galaxies, millions of them, once they are in place, certain group of spirits are going to come in and modify this to create planets. Okay? So think about this, planets. So Earth is one of them. Say Jupiter is another one. The fluid that for the planets, I'm representing the fluids in blue here, as you see on the graphic. The fluid for Jupiter is not the same for Earth. So I like to call this is just me. This is my personal way of saying things. So we don't get confused with the word. So I call this the planetary fluid. So the planetary fluid for Earth is not the same planetary fluid for Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. They all have their specific fluids. Once these planets are created, the planetary fluid is created, and you will have imponderable matter and ponderable matter, as we mentioned before. So imponderable and ponderable matter on the Earth is not the same as other planets. Right? Now, who can create these things? Who creates all of these fluids? Who creates, quotes please, who puts their hands on it to make changes? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's put the graphic aside here a little bit so we can look at it. Universal cosmic fluid, there's only one. There's only one, God. God creates the universal cosmic fluid. Nobody else. You can have the most advanced spirit you can think of. This particular spirit that you just thought of cannot create universal cosmic fluid, although they are able to modify it. So the next 4 levels down, who are the spirits that are able to modify, layer by layer coming down? Spirit Andre LUIZ calls them archangels or the great devas or the great intelligences. These are all different names to address this. So we are just going to call archangels here because it's more of a Christian word. So these archangels are able to modify the universal cosmic fluid one at a time, coming down layer over layer, as you see on the graphic. And they will create planets. For example, some spirit had to create planet Earth. And we know who? Jesus. Now, think about this. You and I, you watching me here, and we are not able to create any planets. We don't have that ability because we are not up to that level yet. However, we are able to take the planetary fluid and from it create imponderable matter and ponderable matter. So who is touching these things? Who uses ponderable and imponderable matter? Us, that Andre LUIZ calls human intelligences. So, hopefully it's very clear who is able to do what. Again, human intelligences, you and I, we cannot create galaxies. We cannot create planets. We would have to be so much more advanced. We would have to be archangels to be able to do something like that. So on the planet, or in the planet, we live under its planetary fluid composed of ponderable matter, matter that we perceive with our five senses, we touch, we feel, we hear, and imponderable matter that we perceive with our vital centers. Okay, so spirits that are incarnated, you and I, are living under ponderable matter. Ponderable matter. We touch those things, we hear. Spirits that are discarnated are still subject and under the planetary fluid. However, they live under the imponderable matter. So let's take a look at these two things here a little bit more in details. Let's bring this up. Let's expand this screen so we can take a better shot at it. So in green, I'm representing anything that is imponderable matter. Again, what is this green imponderable matter? Is matter that belongs to the planetary fluid of planet Earth, but is not perceived by any of our five senses. In red, ponderable matter is the part of the planetary fluid, planet Earth, that is physical, material, as we know it, matter as we know it. Okay, so what do we have under ponderable matter? We have spirits that are incarnated. You are, I am. Okay? Where do these people live? What is their habitat? It's the planet Earth, but not the planet Earth like the ionosphere. No, the crust. We have our feet walking on the crust, if you will, in a very straightforward form. So we incarnate spirits, we are all living on the same habitat. It's called the Earth's crust. And how about imponderable matter? What are we finding there? We find spirits that are not incarnated. They are discarnated, waiting for an opportunity to incarnate again and go on with their lives. These spirits that do not have a physical body, discarnate spirits, they live in the imponderable matter of the planet Earth. What is their habitat? Think about this. It's not the Earth's crust because they're not incarnated. Their habitat is what I call the spiritual habitat. It is the Earth's spiritual layers. And I say this because there's more than one, and we're going to study them now. The layers of the planet for spirits that are discarnated. So, for example, if you know one of a loved one, for example, who is discarnated now, they are living in one of the spiritual layers of the planet. And there are several of them. So we're going to explain what these layers are, how we can understand them in more details. But the spiritual layers of the planet are composed, the spiritual habitat for discarnate spirits. There is not a single incarnate spirit living in there, because incarnate spirits live on the crust. So let's keep going here. So there is interaction between ponderable and imponderable matter in terms of spirits. Spirits, as we usually say, come and go, right? They discarnate, then they reincarnate again. They discarnate, reincarnate again. There's a flux of activity in there. So this happens the same way with the habitat. Every time one of us discarnates, we go to a different habitat. When we are ready to incarnate again, preparing our next life, we prepare, we are ready to go, we change habitats again. We come to live on the crust. So all of this that I'm saying so far is to explain that there are several different spiritual layers of the planet that we are going to go into right now. So follow along, please, and let's see if we can get this thing understood. One of the great Brazilian mediums, her name is Rigorina Cunha. She had this at a young age. She started having dreams, just dreams with strange things that she could not really precisely tell people. But these dreams started to be recurring dreams. So they would happen all the time. And she said, oh my God, this thing it's kind of bugging me. I need to, let's say, maybe if I draw these things on paper, these images that I see every night, maybe if I draw them on paper, they're going to go away and I'll be able to sleep, the whole night without having to deal with this. Not that it's bad, but she wanted to get some more rest per se. So, and she's not an artist. She cannot do drawings. So she did, as she could, the best she could. So she drew 12 of these images those were part of these recurring dreams that she had. With these 12 images, she said, well, now that I have them on paper, these things are going to leave me alone. But it didn't happen. She was still having the same dreams, the same images would come up every night. So one day she takes these 12 images and takes to the great Brazilian medium, Chico Xavier. And she said, listen, and she tells a story. This is what's happening. These are the 12 images. Can you help me here? Because I just want to sleep. I want to go to bed and sleep. So Chico Xavier looks at those and says, do you know what this is? And she said, no, that's what I'm trying to get an answer for. And he said, this is the spiritual, this is NOSSOS, spiritual colony, NOSSOS. And this image that you see on your screen is one of the 12. The other images, which are published on a book, these other images were used for the cover of the book NOSSOS, for the movie NOSSOS, because they were exactly what NOSSOS was like. Okay, so that was just a parenthesis here, real quick. So this image here comes from those dreams. And she comes to explain, because she drew this thing, and she now has to explain what this is, because you might look at it and it might not mean anything to you. So she said, well, I'm going to explain this thing. As she tries to explain, we kind of bring scientific knowledge that match up with what she was trying to tell us, or at least what she was trying to draw. So if you look in the very center of the image, I don't know if you can see very properly, but that's the planet Earth. You can see North America, South America in there, okay? And there's a red circle that I put in there to highlight it. If you go down from the crust, physically speaking, if you go down to the center of the Earth, and that comes from the studies of geology, and this is very well known today. There's all the way in, that's the innermost part of the planet. That's called, in science, it's called inner core. So coming from the very center of the Earth towards the crust, we have inner core. The next layer is called outer core. The next layer is called lower mantle, and the next layer is called upper mantle. All these 4 layers that you see here on your screen are below the crust. This is internal. So this is in the core of the planet. Of course, the temperature is huge and so, that's not the point today. We're not studying the geology of the planet, but those 4 layers are also habitat for spirits. So who is living here? Who are the spirits living here? Remember, spirits that are discarnated. You and I do not live here. You and I do not live in the outer core, in the lower mantle. No, we live on the crust. So who is living here? Those are spirits living in what we call generically dark zones. Some people call lower zones. There are different names depending on the belief system, actually. But we're going to call dark zones here. So there are spirits that when they discarnate, they go to live in the dark zones or in one of the 4 equivalent layers of the planets, but inside, in the core of the planets. Okay? All right. Above the upper mantle, we have the crust. That's us. That's you and me right now. Who lives in the crust? What kind of spirit lives on the crust? Us, incarnate spirits. There is not a single discarnate spirit living on the crust. 100% of the spirits living on the crust are incarnate spirits. Then it goes up. We are here on the crust, but there's more, right? Above the crust, we are subject to gravity and different things, right? So there's more. Above the crust, we have, we're talking about spiritual layers. We have what we call the umbra. In the very early days of translations from the spirits books, we used to call these lower zones, dark zones. It would depend a lot on who is translating and what belief system the person comes from. It was creating a lot of confusion because you would call what you see here in green that I'm listing as umbral, it would be called sometimes dark zones, sometimes lower zones, which is different. If you look at the graphic, you see they're completely different. So we decided to, in the newest translations in the past 5 or 10 years, we decided to standardize the translation. So now we call the layer, the spiritual layer above the crust, umbral. And you see here in green on your screen. Okay, there's more. Above the umbral, we're going to find another layer, much more advanced, arts, culture, and science. Arts, culture, and science. Above that one, there's another one, universal fraternal love. And above that one, the directives of the planets. This is the highest layer within the planetary fluid. Above that, it's called stellar dome. That's already going out of the planetary fluid, the imponderable matter that belongs to the planetary fluid. So that's why I put those little dots in white to make sure you understand this is going out of the planetary fluid. So if we take a look, a better look, let's put a little lenses here upon this umbral. It is usually to make studies easier so we can understand, we usually divide this thing in 3 layers, 3 sublayers, I would say, lower, mid, and upper umbral. And you can see the lower umbral is the closest thing to the Earth's crust. It would be almost the equivalent of the Earth's crust for spirits that are no longer incarnated. Then we have the mid-umbral and then the upper umbral. Upper umbral is where spiritual colony Nossolar is located. So it is 2 layers above us, 3 layers. So when you look at this from the inner core, coming all the way up to directives of the planet, you're gonna see there's 12 layers. Actually 10 layers, right? 10 layers, because the crust is not really a layer for discarnate spirits. And that's interesting because we go back to the beginning. When we discarnate, which layer do we go to? How do I pick my layer? I don't want to go to the lower umbral. I would rather go to maybe universal fraternal love, maybe arts and culture. I want to stay away from the inner core. I want to stay away from lower mantle. How do I pick my layer? What do I do? How do I apply for which form do I fill to request a certain layer? It's not like that. Let me give you an idea here. Let me give you a better idea. Think about a recipient that you have water in, just like you see here on the picture. So you have a recipient and water up to a certain level. If you take a styrofoam little ball and you throw on the recipient, it's going to stay afloat on the top. Nobody is going to argue about that. We can do collective prayer. We can do everything to bring this ball to the bottom of the recipient. It's just not going to happen. It will stay right there. By the same token, if we put let's say a plum or an iron bowl and we let go from the top, it will go to the bottom of the recipient. You will not stay in the middle. You will not stay afloat. No matter how many prayers I do to make it come up like 1 inch or 2 inches from the bottom, there is no such a thing. It will never, ever happen. However, if I physically hold, say, the styrofoam ball, physically hold it, and I bring my hand halfway down the recipient. So now the little ball is in my hand halfway down. It will stay in that position for as long as I hold that little ball, whichever it is, the iron ball or the styrofoam or any other material, doesn't matter. For as long as I hold that down on that position, it will stay. So let's say, for example, that I'm holding halfway down the styrofoam little ball. What happens if I open my hand and let go? So I'm going to free up the styrofoam ball. What happens when I let it go? You will go back up to the surface. There's nothing that I can do to make it go somewhere else. No prayer will bring it down, nothing. You will stay afloat. Same for the iron ball. If I'm holding the iron ball in my hand, in the middle, halfway down, for as long as I hold it, it will stay in there. If I hold it for 1 hour, it is guaranteed that during that 1 hour, it's not going to go to the bottom. Now, the minute that I let go, the minute that I free up the ball, the iron ball, it will go to the bottom. And there's nothing that you and I can do to make it go somewhere else to another height within the recipient. It will not happen. It is such with the perispirit. The perispirit is the little ball that is being held by the physical body. When the physical body lets go, meaning moment of discarnation, when the physical body lets go, what happens to the perispirit? It's going to go to the layer that is compatible with it. Styrofoam ball stays above because of some physical characteristic known as density, or even better, specific weight. The specific weight of a styrofoam ball is less than the specific weight of water. That's why it stays up. The specific weight of an iron ball is much higher than the specific weight of the water, so it goes down. Same for the perispirit. The perispirit is going to go to the layer that is compatible with its specific weight. So at the moment of discarnation, there is no point in call God because I want to talk to him. I want to convince him that I deserve to be in arts and culture. There is no such a thing because my perispirit, at the moment of discarnation, my perispirit has a well-defined specific weight. And I can't change that at the very last minute. Call God here because I want to talk to him. I want to have an audience. We've had an audience since we were simple and ignorant until the point of discarnation on this life. That's our audience. We can't bribe God. We can't buy a place in one of these layers. It isn't like this. Our perispirit has a specific weight composed of what? Of our spiritual history. Combination from day one, simple and ignorant, of all credits and debits. All credits and debts. All of it. And then they will sum up and they will give me a specific weight for my perispirit. Of course, that's not weight in terms of grams and kilograms. It's terms of vices and virtues. That's how this is measured in the perispirit. If my perispirit is very heavy because, I practice a lot of vices, I haven't decided to go the right way yet. So if my perispirit is very heavy, I might go to, let's just say outer core. And I can't call God for an audience trying to buy my place, whatever, in the umbrella. It's just not going to happen. So we go to the place, or not place, but to the layer, spiritual layer of the planet that is compatible with our perispirit. Some spirits go to a layer that is above the directives of the planet, which is the stellar dome, because they might come from other planets to join us here to help us. So they might come from Jupiter, stellar dome. They incarnate. When they are incarnated, they are on the crust, just like you and me. When they discarnate, they go all the way up to their specific level. So you see, on Earth, we have incarnate spirits coming from all spiritual layers. So we have people here on the Earth's crust that came from inner core. Others came from universal fraternal love. Others came from the upper umbrella. We are all living here, all at the same time. So you're going to find living here, for example, let me just give you an example. Let's say Gandhi and Hitler. They were, right, at one point, both living at the same time on the same crust. And I can give you several examples of both extremes living on the Earth's crust. When we leave the crust after death, we are going to go to the layer of the planet that is compatible with our perispiritual specific weight. One interesting thing, if you revisit history, one of the great influences of Christianism was Emperor Constantine. I guess he was the one supposedly, without going too deep in history, but he was the one who made, first of all, stopped the persecutions of Christians and made Christianity the official religion of the empire. And he was, before all this, he was born a paganist. Paganism was throughout the whole empire. So on his last days, on his deathbed, he calls one of the priests. The priests go there to, just talk to him and make sure he was, going to be granted a good place in heaven or whatever they call it at the time, right? And then he said, well, I want to be baptized. That's a couple of days before his death. He was in a deathbed. I want to get baptized because I became myself a Christian. I did a lot of things. I helped the Christians to have their head above the water. Now they can go out of the, hidden places and so. So I think I deserve to be baptized, to go to a better place when I die, and death is like a couple of days away. And that's what history tells us. However, that's not what happens. It might be a historical event, but it doesn't happen to me and you. There is no such a thing as like a couple of days before, let me be this good guy for 48 hours and I'll jump from, let's say, upper mental to arts and culture. It's not like this. So I think this idea of the density or the specific weight of the spirit, perispirit, explains where do we go when we die. So usually, not usually, but it's very common for us spiritists to say, where do we go when we die? To the spirit world. Yes, it will. We will. But here on this particular topic, I wanted to bring you more of that. Where in the spirit world am I going to go? What layer do I go to and why and how it happens? So hopefully I was able to bring this idea of what the layers of the planet are. We're going to be here for comments and questions if there are any. And thanks so much for participating with us today.
Thank you so very much, Luis, for the reflections and wonderful information and presentations you provided all of us today. So we are now open for comments and questions from the audience. And the first one is from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Can you expand the action of the intelligent principle on the animal kingdom? Are animals individual or collective manifestations of the intelligent principle?
Yeah, I'm going to address that. It's not really a direct part of the question, but yeah, we spoke about this in the beginning. We went really fast because this is more part of evolution. However, the interaction of the intelligent principle with the animal kingdom starts because, just remember, the intelligent principle already knows how to infuse life into inert matter. You learned that, you went through the plants kingdom, then you got to the animal kingdom. So yes, you will create different things from the simplest unicellular animals. It goes through more complex forms and so to the most complex form in the animal kingdom. And the animal kingdom, yes, the manifestations are collective. It's what we call the monads. So the monads are, it's hard, the vocabulary, it's difficult, but it's as if the monad was this collective soul. At one point, imagine, for example, a classroom. So you have 50 kids on a classroom. You can refer to this as a classroom. When you say that this is a classroom, you did not pinpoint each individual. The names of each kid they didn't come up. So we see that as a group, as a whole group. That's what the animal kingdom is. You don't say, when you say the giraffe, for example, you don't name the giraffes. You just say it's a giraffe. It's very generic because they are grouped by these monads. When the monad becomes so advanced that they can sustain individuality, then yes, it's like little babies, I would say, baby spirits born out of this intelligent principle. But yeah, at the animal level, they are collective manifestations.
Okay, thank you. So, from Daniel Santos, thanks, Luis, for this beautiful explanation. You explained about layers of our planet, which make sense from the physical point of view. However, we are mostly mental, emotional individuals, which are not physical per se. So, is it possible that an incarnate spirit lives several of these layers during a single lifetime?
No, okay. So when we are incarnate, we are on the crust. We are not living in the umbra. We are not living in arts and culture. We are not living in the inner core. Incarnates live in one place, crust. Okay, so, and it's, for example, if you have let's say you have a building, 12 floors. okay? 12 apartments, 1 per floor. And then the manager of the building sends a memo and says, listen, people, we got to resolve a few things. We're going to meet together, all of us. Please be on the 5th floor tonight at 7 p.m., for example. At 7 p.m. tonight, regardless of what is your apartment, you are on the 5th floor. At that point, you are living on the 5th floor, maybe for an hour, 2 hours, whatever the meeting goes for. When the meeting ends, you shake hands and you go back to your 10th floor, 12th floor, 1st floor. So while you are on the crust, incarnated, it doesn't really make sense to talk about spiritual layers. Spiritual layers are where we come from and we go back to. Now, is it possible to come out from inner core to the crust? When we leave the crust on that lifetime, go to arts and culture. Possible, yes. Probable, not necessarily. But we have examples. Paul, right? Saul and Paul. He came, from, I'm not going to say he came from dark zones, but he came from a certain level, and he left this life. He left this world at a much higher place. So he might have changed layers where he came from and where he went to, because the density, the spiritual, the specific wage of his spirit might have changed during the lifetime. It's a rare case. For most of us, it doesn't happen that way, but it's not impossible. It's just not probable.
Okay, thank you very, very much. That's most helpful. So, from Andre Bevilacqua, can the incarnated spirit regress in its evolution if it was worse in the last incarnation than in the previous incarnation?
Oh, that never happens. It's always progressive. You can stagnate. You can come in from wherever you are in the layer, spiritual layer. You come in, incarnate, don't do anything at all, and die, and you're still at the same place. Going back is not possible, because it's always progressive. Incarnation, discarnation, the circle, the cycles of life. It's always progressive. Worst case, you stagnate. So it's not possible to come in from arts and culture, live your life, discarnate, and go to Umbra. It's not going to happen. At the worst case scenario, you are the minimum, you are at the same level. That means we are, regardless of who you are and who I am, we are at the best incarnation ever. Hitler was at his best incarnation ever. So was Osama bin Laden. So was the great, tyrants of humanity. They were all on their very best life at the time.
Okay, very good. That's very, very helpful information, and very good explanation. From the United States Spiritist Federation, we have a question. Once created, do the elements of the stellar organization develop through what we call natural laws?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question is, but stellar anything created has to have intelligence behind it. Matter by itself doesn't do anything. So that's why I said in the beginning, the entire creation comes from the interaction between what's intelligence or spiritual principle with the fluid, universal fluid. So once the elements are created, for example, cosmic dwellings out of universal cosmic fluid, cosmic dwellings, then stellar organization, once they are in place, other spirits will develop it. But you still need, it doesn't happen by itself. You still need spirits making it happen. That's why, for example, Spiritism is very adamant in explaining that the psychosphere, the psychic atmosphere of the planet depends on us, because we are the ones creating it. You and I, because we are the ones under the planetary fluid. Spirits living in Jupiter do not help create that atmosphere. Spirits live in Mars do not help this. It's us. 25 billion spirits, 8 billion incarnate. It's us. We are the ones developed, making it happen. So you still need intelligent principles making it happen. So I don't know exactly what you mean by natural laws, but it's natural because somebody's making it happen. It's a natural course of things, but it doesn't help by itself. It doesn't happen by itself.
Okay, thank you for that. It's most helpful. From MK, awesome lecture. To me, you could not be any clearer if you tried. Thank you. Do you think we visit other layers when dreaming?
Absolutely. We can, for example, if you think of one of the metaphysic phenomena, psychometry, for example. Psychometry is the ability that certain mediums have to put their hands, for example, I have a pen here. They put their hands in here, and within minutes, they're able to tell a history about this. A lot of times, they are driven. Of course, you have spirit guides and everything else as a medium, you know, they have help from the spirits. But when they put their hands in here, they might have to be taken to other layers, other than the layer they came from, to be able to bring the information. So let's say, for example, let's just make an example here. I came from lower zones, for example, but I am a medium, a very good medium in terms of metaphysic production. So if I'm drawn to psychometry, I put my hands in here, and this pen belonged to somebody who came from arts and culture. So I will, under, of course, merit has to do with it, but I will be taken to that layer for a few seconds or so and come back with, oh, this belonged to Mr. Such and such and such, who, by the way, was a great person in arts, whatever. But yes, we can visit under dreaming at times or as metaphysic phenomena. But we have to have merit, and we have to have spirits guiding us. By ourselves, we can't do this. It's like, for example, if I decided to, right now, I want to live under the water. I'm going to be able to do for maybe a few minutes, but then I'm going to die because my body is not physically prone to live in that environment. So if we come from Umbra, we try to make it to arts and culture, we're not going to be able to sustain our perispirit in there.
Okay, very helpful explanation. Thank you for that. From the United States Spiritist Federation, what or who decides which zone we go to? Will a spirit help us to understand our situation when we discarnate?
Okay, so what or who decides? We do, ourselves. What is the decision point? When every time we say a point, something punctual, we are subscribing to the materialistic paradigm. The spiritualist paradigm, it comes from simple and ignorant, and it sweeps scans the entire history. So who decides? Us, based on what? On what we do from day one, simple and ignorant to the moment of death on this life. Because that's how I compose my perispirit, which is going to have its specific weight. Right? So who decides? Us. Will spirits help us understand? They will, but sometimes we cannot understand. This is, for example, when you go to school, let's just say that you don't like chemistry, for example. If you really don't like, if you can't see yourself learning chemistry, becomes challenging because it's just not your interest. You're interested in other things. So we're going to complain about the teacher, the professor, he's no good, she's no good. And then you're going to say, oh my God, I need better grades. So I'm going to get a secondary professor or a private teacher to help me. But you see, it's not the teacher. It's I am not in a position to understand well for whatever reason. So spirits will help us understand, yes, but that doesn't mean that we understand. they will do the best effort to convey the information with situations, examples, intuition, inspiration, but it doesn't mean that we are going to be able to take it in.
Okay. So we have a question from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Are the discoveries we make in science only possible because higher spirits allow it?
Yeah, well, discoveries depends a little bit, because think about this. A lot of the things that science discovered, for example, if you go back in time, okay, 300 years, 400 years, a lot of the studies on science, what we became medicine later on, you wouldn't have to use people to test things. For example, if I have a new drug, a new medicine, of course they use rats in labs. That's not the point, but they use labs with animals for that. But there's going to be a point where you have to have the first human taking that drug or putting that drug on their skin to see if it works. So in the past, these people were people in prison. They would serve the purpose. All right, 300-400 years ago, they would take people in prison because they were taken away from society for whatever the reason, and they would be the ones that would serve the purpose. Of course, the scientist who came up with the drug, with the idea, with the experiment, he has intuition from higher spirits, or he is a higher spirit himself. Now, the spirits are at the bottom of the scale, which are in prison, and so they are also helping in a way. They were not the ones who discovered this, but with their presence and their physical body undergoing the medical trials and experiments, they do have participation on the outcome, and it's not bad if you think about it. So it's a little bit. It's not only the scientist; it's a combination of things. It's not only the higher spirits. Lower spirits serve their purpose. Animals serve their purpose.
Okay. Thank you very, very much for that. Very good explanations. So thank you again, LUIZ, for the wonderful reflections and information you provided. And we have one other question here from Andre Bebalacqua. Is there any way to know if our balance between good actions and negative actions is positive or negative, so that we can seek to react along our evolutionary journey on Earth?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, but we are experiencing a world full of problems, like maybe we never had it before. So this is how I see things. When you have a spirit that comes from the lower zones, let's say lower umbral or even below the crust, if you have one of those, and so when they incarnate, they are on the crust, just like you and me. They are on the crust now. If these people raise to power, it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter. They raise to power, okay? They raise to power, but as a spirit, they're still all the way down as morality. So if we support, if we look at what this spirit is doing, and we agree with that, we are okay with that, we should perceive that we are complying with negative actions, although we are not the ones in power, but we accept that. And I'm saying this because right now, if you look at the last 50 years in the history of humanity, any country, any city, it doesn't matter, there's been a tremendous struggle for power and change of power in several countries, several places, several cities. And, one goes out because of a certain reason, which really doesn't matter. The next one comes in with the same thing, with the same line of thought. So coming from basically the same level. So you have a guy from, I don't know, upper mantle, he leaves, he's get outthrown. The next one comes in, he's also from the upper mantle. If we comply to this, if we are not able to understand what these people are doing, if we subscribe to these, those are also negative actions. Although it's not an action in the sense that there's movement. It doesn't have to have movement per se. So you see, that's one way of classifying ourselves. Where am I? Where am I? What group do I belong to? So we can look at what we support in the world. Do I support death penalty? Do I support abortion? Do I support this and that? It will make us understand where we are. Okay, and relate ourselves into one of those 10 spiritual layers. Because if you support death penalties, for example, for sure you don't come from directives of the planet. You don't come from arts and culture, universal fraternal love. You don't come from any of those. So it's an indication of what we are coming from.
Okay. Thank you very, very much, LUIZ, for all this wonderful information, and something that we will definitely carry with us through the week. And our thanks to everyone who's watched today's talk live. And to those also who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Please don't miss our next live next Saturday, April 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, when Vicente Pessoa will be speaking about Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. So, LUIZ, before we close the live, would you please offer a prayer?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So let's raise our minds towards the greatest master of all, Jesus. Let's have his image on our heads. Thank you, Jesus, for all the learning opportunities that we have. Thanks for bringing us your message in person, staying with us, make sure we can understand what you're saying. We ask for those individuals serving time in prisons, most of them under tremendous amount of revolt, rebellion. They do not understand why they're in there. That the higher spirits can help them go through this process. Also, those in hospitals, that they can be served by the highly evolved spirits. A lot of the people in hospitals also do not understand why they're going through whatever diseases, illnesses, that these people can be supported by the spirits as well. So once again, Jesus, thank you very much for all the opportunities that we have in life, and continue to be with us here, now, and always. Thank you.
Thank you. May all of you have a calming and mindful weekend.